I'm going.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll see if I can get down.
So you go to the second one or the first one?
All I've got is an invite to the Abbey at 1 o'clock. I'm glad it's in the Abbey.
Yeah.
And why not?
Yeah.
I mean, he was a man of St Albans, as we all were really for a while, you know, because we were based around St Albans. The Pioneer Youth Club was where we rehearsed and started our racket. It was a great time, and all of those things were important to our development, really. And here we are. But none of us would have expected it. He was very, very active. Certainly musically. I don't know what he did sports-wise or to keep himself together anymore.
Well, I think playing kept him fit.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Carrying a guitar around, it's like weight training, isn't it? Especially with somebody as small as Jim.
Yeah, well...
He was tiny.
So, was it Saturday before last, I think it was, 9 o'clock, phone rang. The mobile, looked at it as Stevie Rodford, and I thought, uh-oh. I actually knew what he was phoning me for. How about that?
Yeah.
Then I sort of held it all together, and then when I put the phone down, I sort of collapsed. So, not collapsed, but, I was overcome. And he's been part of my life and for forever, really, especially from a musical standpoint. And then Dave was trying to get in touch with me. Dave did, it was like pulling teeth trying to do it, but eventually we did get to talk to one another, and he wasn't sanguine at all. He was taken aback, as Russ Ballard, because all of these conversations were half-hour conversations. It wasn't like, oh, Jim's dead, oh, okay, we'll talk later. It wasn't that. Then I did Rod, and that was another hour, and Russell was speechless. I've never known him speechless. It all went very, very quiet. And then I spoke to Stubbsy, and we started, we made ourselves laugh, so that was good.
That's good, yeah.
But we started talking about all of Jim's foibles, which, if you like, we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
And I know Jim wouldn't mind because, well, he's not here anyway, but you know what I mean. he was quite proud of some of his little things that he did. And Ray called, and it sort of went from there, really. Yeah, and then none of us could come to terms with it at all. We just couldn't. It's just stupid. Yeah. We had things to do. How could you do that? How could that happen? But it's very sad. But we will celebrate, and that's what we can do.
Have you spoken to Gene?
I did. Michael Faraday, who used to be a drum tech for the Kinks, phoned up, and he said, I phoned Gene. I thought, blimey, I haven't. I said, how was it? She said she was fine. And, I was not frightened, but, I wasn't sure what I was going to say. So anyway, I thought, well, if he can do it, I'm going to do it. So I phoned her and I said the obvious things, and I thought, how am I going to sign off? I said, oh, by the way, Jean, I've been thinking about this. You're going to have to take up the bass. She said, what? I said, you're going to have to take up the bass, otherwise the Rodford files are going to disappear. And she started laughing. I said, I'll get you somebody to teach you. I said, well, maybe Russell could teach you. I played in the Rodford Files just before Christmas, and it was great fun, and I guess I will be doing it again. I used up an awful lot of platitudes talking to people on the phone, the one about the Chinese proverb, when somebody dies, a library closes. And I've always liked that one. That's really good. And of course that's all gone. Of course you can't harness it. Oh, and the other one is God laughs when he hears your plans. I do have a million of them.
Oh, that's cheered us up immensely.
Yes. Did you not know that? You weren't expecting anything from me. No, I wasn't.
So how old were you when you first met each other?
Midget. I knew of him because I would go and see the Mike Cotton's band, Mike Cotton Sound, without really knowing him. But in those days, you knew everybody. There was no unhappiness. You saw other bands, rival bands, and you talked to them and you liked them, and that's one thing that Jim had no side to him at all, if that's the right word. He would talk to anybody and did. Yeah, I tried to work out how many years Jim and I had been in bands together, and I was invited to join the Mike Cotton Sound. And I can't work out when that date was, but I'm guessing it's when I came back from working in France with Richard Anthony. So that would have been, I'm guessing, it was 66 or maybe 67. And they asked me to join, and I would sit in with them at sort of posh watering holes like the Cromwellian and the places where they played, because they were very successful. And it was in the days of when you would advertise your gigs in the Melody Maker, and I would look at theirs, and they had 31 days every month, and they said, "Do you want to join the band?" And I thought, I don't know whether I want to play 31 days every month. So in the end, I declined, but I still kept sitting in with them. And the next thing I knew, as far as Jim was concerned, we would bump into each other at the Blue Boar. But there was a time when you would bump into everybody, literally everybody at the Blue Boar. You know, you'd turn up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know where the Blue Boar is, don't you? You don't? It's on the M1. It's not called the Blue Boar anymore. It was the first of the motorway service stations, and it was Watford Gap. Now, why it was called Watford Gap, I've got no idea, but it was Watford Gap. And you'd turn up there, and the Stones would be there, or they'd arrive when you were having your egg on toast, or the Beatles would be there. It was never, "I'll see you at the Blue Boar." It wasn't like that. You went in there, and everybody was sitting there. It was a rather strange time. So Jim and I would bump into each other there, and at various places like Cluxcleek in Hampstead, where Mike Cotton's band played a lot. And I would sit in and really enjoy myself, because they had horns and you could play with the horns. Yeah, you could do those accents with the horns. So I did, to the nth degree, really. And I really enjoyed it, but didn't join them. Next thing I remember on the Jim subject, Unit 4+2 were playing in Basildon, and I looked out into the audience and I thought, I'm sure that's Rod Argent there, and that looks like Chris White with him. And we got on with doing the show, and at the end they came over and it was indeed them, and they said, "We're having a band, would you and Russell like to be in it?" So I said, "Yes," and they said, "Come round and hear the song." So then we were in a band together, me and Jim, in 1968/9, and then Argent went on for 5 or 6 years, but we also had a band called GB Blues Company, which was with the remnants of Mike Cotton's horn section. A chap called Root Jackson was the singer. Derek Griffiths, who was engaged to my wife, and I managed to wrestle him, and funnily enough, he's going to be at the funeral, I'm sure. Anyway, so we did that for many years, and it was when Jim was knee-deep in the Kinks, so if Jim was away, then I could keep it together with the deck bass player, or if I was away and Jim wasn't, Jim could keep it together with the drummer. And this went on for ages until I joined the Kinks, and whereupon both of us were away at the same time. So that meant they had a succession of very loose rhythm sections, I'll say it like that. So Jim and I are now together again. So having started in '68, I guess, with Argent, we're now in the Kinks. And in between the Kinks and Argent, there was another band called Phoenix, which was me and Jim and John Verity. The day after he died, which was the Sunday, I had a gig, an unplugged gig with John Verity in the Horse and whatever it is, in High Street, St Albans. And the news had just broken. And we spent more time talking to the audience about Jim than we did playing. That was the offshoot. So there's another year or 3 together. And then we joined the Kinks, but even when we were in the Kinks, as I said, we kept the GB Blues band going. And then we decided, I don't know if you know about Jim, but he couldn't stop himself. You know, he is the one who, the band would come back, I mean, the Zombies would come back from an arduous American tour, and Jim would have a gig that night. You know, whereas everybody else would go to bed for a week, but Jim would have a gig.
It just always seemed to be working all the
yeah,
time.
he did,
I said to him, "How can you do this? It's what I do. I've always done this. This is my job. This is what I do."
And he was really good at it.
Oh, absolutely.
He was, yeah, he really was. Yeah.
If you're really good at it, people want you, don't they? So.
Yeah, and I hope he would laugh at this, but I've actually said it to his face. You know, Jim would get into the van, bus, whatever we were travelling in, and he would go to sleep. Now, we've just picked him up from his house. He's got into the bus and has gone to sleep. We'd get to the gig and he'd wake up, or we'd get to wherever we were going for a cup of coffee on the way to the gig, and he'd wake up. And then we'd do the sound check, and he might go for a little sleep, or he might go back to the hotel or whatever. And so Jim was older than me, but I've been awake longer than he has. Because I've spent a lifetime of looking out van or car windows, like Dave, looking for UFOs. I've never seen one, unlike Dave, who I know has. And part of the reason for writing On the Road Again is that I've had this insatiable desire to see the world. And the point about that is if you don't like travelling, then rock and roll's not for you. You shouldn't be in it. You know, you get the sort of oasis effect where everybody hates one another because they actually don't want to be on the road. Well, we loved being on the road, and it was what we did best, and we were gypsies. Can I say that?
Yes.
I suppose I can. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not offending anybody.
We're not offended.
No, but it might be the other 2 million people listening to this.
There's clearly a different word in there.
Everybody can be offended by something.
Yeah.
So we were on the road together for, I think, it was solidly for 25 years. I'll give you a little glimpse of Jim. The Kinks were in America, finishing an American tour. And we were sitting on the plane, on the tarmac at somewhere on the East Coast, let's say Springfield or somewhere like that. And we had to get up to Kennedy to get the plane to London. And that was the plane, you know, we'd done a long American tour, so we would be on our way to London. Fabulous. So we sat on the plane and it chucked it down with rain. Now, up until then, I didn't know that rain could stop a plane taking off, but it can. And it did. So once the rain stopped, we began, you know, and they started getting the engines warmed up and tried to take off, and the brakes were seized on. So that plane was going nowhere. So we sat on the plane thinking, what the hell are we going to do now? And they got us another plane, but this plane was going to LaGuardia. Well, LaGuardia is not very close to Kennedy, and we were getting our big silver bird from Kennedy. So the plane took off, and we all landed in LaGuardia, and thought, what are they going to do with us now? So we had to get from there to Kennedy, which I think you could probably walk it, but you wouldn't want to. But we actually got there and to see our plane taking off for London. So we said, right, what are you going to do with us then? Well, I didn't. Jonesy, as in Ken Jones, said, what are you going to do with them? So they said, well, either we can put you in a hotel tonight and you can take Concorde back to London tomorrow. How would that be? Or we could put you on a plane heading for London in 2 or 3 hours' time, and that'll get you to London. Now, common sense says we will take Concorde. But there's an unwritten law and I think Nobby might be responsible for this, that if you were getting home on a Saturday, or leaving America on a Saturday, you had to get home in time for a pint down the pub, followed by Sunday dinner. That was it, and that was how you did it. So it was the, you know. So Jim decided he was going to take that. He said, "No, I'm going on the plane. I'm not taking Concorde." So we thought, "Oh, great." So we decided stupidly we would, like sheep, we would go on with it. So we got on the plane. It took off, and may I never get off this bike. The captain came on, this plane is going to Zurich. And now we'd all got on with tickets that said London. So how on earth that had happened? So we arrived in Zurich, 3-hour wait for a plane, which wasn't going to London because nothing was going from London to Zurich that day. It was going to Frankfurt. So they took us to Frankfurt, whereupon there was a 5-hour wait for a plane to go to London. So, I mean, the day has gone. I mean, actually several days have gone. By the time we arrive in London, we get to Heathrow, and as we land, I look out of the window, and Concorde is just taking off on its way. No, it had been cleaned, everything had happened, all the sick had been mopped up and everything, and Concorde was going back to New York. And, I mean, it was the next day. It wasn't even, you know, obviously there was no point in having Sunday dinner on a Monday, although we probably did. So that's one of Jim's things, you know, and he had lots and lots of this. Now, what else can I tell you? We were in a Kinks band where we didn't know what was coming next. Ray probably didn't know what was coming next either. But if we were very lucky, the first song would be the first song. The one that was on the bit of paper that everybody had, front of house, you know, the lights, the guys doing the monitors, the road crew. And if we were lucky, that first song would be that one. But you only knew which song it was when Ray started it, and when Ray counted it in. You remember the intro tape, which ended with da-da-da-da-da, and then we would get on the stage. Well, Ray would just think what song he was going to do. Now, it was supposed to be, what was the first one I played on? Oh, I'll get it. But sometimes he would just shout. Actually, he wouldn't even shout. He would count in 20th Century Man. Well, I don't know if you know about 20th Century Man. It never had an arrangement. It was complicated without an arrangement. And me and Jim never had, and Stubbsy never had a train wreck. We always managed to negotiate it, and after that we would be on our own. And so there would be a list, but Ray would play the audience and give them what he thought they wanted, give people what they want. So we never knew what was coming next, and sometimes Ray was writing a song on the stage, and me and Jim would look at one another because we had to get in. Ray would start, he'd show everybody the chord, well, he'd show Jim the chord, and Jim would know what key we were in, and Ray would start a rhythm, and I'd look at Midget and I would do a suitably obvious fill, da-da-da-da, or whatever it was, and we'd be in. We had no idea what the song is, and if Ray was writing it then and there, like, do you know about Regatta My Arse? Well, Regatta My Arse just happened on the stage. You can do that in the marquee to 50 or 100 or 200 people, but doing that in front of 100,000 is it's a bit dangerous, and it could very easily go wrong. But it didn't, and the reason it didn't is because Jim and I had such an empathy that somehow we knew what we were all likely to do. And also, it's called Horse's Eyes. Jim was very big on Horse's Eyes, and that's, if you see a band that's not making eye contact, you know it's not a very good band. You have to be watching one another like hawks, and just from a flicker of an eye, you can see what's going. And if Ray plays a seventh where there isn't one, you know he's going somewhere else that you're not ready for, or you are ready for because you've had years of it. Yeah. So Jim knew exactly what was going on, and so we managed to do things that if we were drunk we would have not had a chance. And so we would have that much off the top of a bottle of Heineken before we got on, rather than the pint that we used to have and the 3 pints that, dare I say, some of the others had. So Jim was very good at empathy with me, and we had 25 years, and I can't believe he's gone. Jim was instrumental in me getting the gig with the Kinks, of course. We were at a club in North London, in Finchley, the Torrington, and Jim and I were playing in GB Blues Company, and there were 10 of us in GB Blues Company because it had Mike Cotton's horn section. And Jim didn't say anything. I looked out into the audience and I thought, do you know that geezer looks like Ray? And I think I'd done both Dave's albums by then. And I looked at it, looks like Ray. And we got on with playing because there was a lot of playing in GB Blues Company, and it was great, wonderful. And it turned out to be Ray. Ray came over, and the rest is history. But you know all that story, don't you, about me being a bit concerned about Mick and so on. And so that was, and the next thing I know, I was in the Kinks. But I didn't know I was in the Kinks. Anyway, Jim got me into the band, and that's it.
Did Jim get you the Dave Davis gig?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because we were pretty inseparable, or were we insufferable? But we were together a lot because GB Blues Company were quite popular. So if Jim wasn't there, I mean, it had to be shoehorned into everything. And certainly when we were both in the Kinks, we'd be in the studio with a gig to do that night with GB Blues Company, and sitting there, thinking, with stomachache as you get, because we were never sure whether somebody knew we had anyway. So that was the beginning of our togetherness, and we started doing sessions for anybody who wanted us. We had a call. Chris White was producing Diana Dawes, and it was at a studio in North London, and we all got there, and Diana Dawes floated in. And she was past her best, but she still was Diana Dawes. And we thought, we're playing with Diana Dawes, this is stupid. And so we did the A-side, as it were, and that was easy. It was a rock and roll song, and what could go wrong? And then at 11:45, lunchtime on a Sunday, the MD came rushing in and said, I forgot about the B-side. And we were all thinking, we'll be down the pub in a minute. And we thought, well, can't be complicated. And he gave us the parts, and they were fly shit. They were absolute Las Vegas fly shit. And this was a song that somebody had sung, not Diana, but somebody had sung in Las Vegas, and it was, not only was it fly shit, it had been adulterated with even more fly shit. And we're looking at this and we thought, well, we'll just have to apply ourselves to this in the normal way, and we'll learn the accents, except that the accents changed every verse. You just couldn't make it up. So eventually, I have no idea what happened to that song, but we did it. And of course we did Colin Blunston, and we did a great many sessions with people. I should have written that down because I haven't gone there yet. We were going, it was Argent, and we were on our way to the Piper Club in Rome. London to Rome, quite a long way. And we always stopped halfway in Munich. And so we had to get to Munich. But we had a new roadie, and we had something called a comma walkthrough for the gear, which was the biggest van you could get, which was also overloaded. And we also had an American car. We had a Galaxy 500, a convertible, as you would, perfect, for a band. So no miles to the gallon, but you could do no miles to the gallon with the hood down. And that's something we used to do. You know about throwing a moon? You drop your pants.
Oh, right.
Well, normally bands would see each other on the M1, and they would drop their pants as you went by, and press their bottoms against the window, which was called pressed ham. And that was Jim's word for it. But we, of course, had a convertible, so we could drop the hood at 70 miles an hour, and then drop our pants, and then all stand up. And that was pretty stupid. But anyway, we had well, actually, no, we were the kings of the road with this. We never got arrested for it, but we probably should have done. Anyway, we're heading with this new roadie who is driving the comma walkthrough, and Fred is driving it was called the Yobmobile. I think that was Jim's name for it as well, the convertible. And we probably got about a mile down the road, and the van came to a halt, and the guy said, "I can't do this." I said, "What do you mean? What can't you do?" So I can't drive on the wrong side of the road. So we said, "Of course you can, it's easy, look." And so anyway, in the end, he got into the car, and me and Jim, elder statesman, drove the bleeding van all the way to Rome. And it had steering. You remember when you see black and white French films, they used to steer like this. And it had a steering wheel that was horizontal.
Almost flat,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yeah. And because the steering was gone on this, that's how we had to drive it, which was fine until we got to chicanes. We were going through Germany. We were going down through the chicanes. Anyway, that was another Jim story, and we triumphed, of course. The thing about remembering all these stories is you sort of need a beer in your hand. and you need Jim with you. I mean, that's the other thing. In Banging On, and in the next one, On the Road Again, there's a lot of stories of Jim and me, and if I can't remember it, I'll say, actually, I'm afraid I can't remember that bit, but I know Jim can, so give him a call and he'll put you right. So I won't be able to do that anymore.
Was he one for telling stories, Jim?
Do you know what? I can't say one way or t'other. I don't ever recall him being on his feet, if you see what I mean.
No.
Whereas, because of some of the things I've done in my life, there's been a lot of standing on my feet and making it up and telling lies. So, oh, did you know Jim's writing a book?
No.
Yeah. Jim was meticulous. I wasn't meticulous. I say I made it up, it's not quite true, but Jim's got reams of, and diaries going back to the Mike Cotton sound and all that sort of stuff. So all of that is put together, and he's been working hard on it. And he's got, I forget what date he said he's got up to, but it's mid-Kinks. I think it's around the time that I joined, or something like that. It just needs bashing into shape, and I think it should come out. And Stevie Ray, Rodford, were talking about it the other day. And I think Jim would like it very much to come out, and we could see his side of the story. Because the interesting thing is about writing biographies or autobiographies is that nobody sees it in quite the same way as you do, which is why Argent, all sitting collectively, could not write an autobiography, and neither could the Kinks, for lots of reasons. But everybody sees things in a different light, and even, a snapshot of a particular day when we did whatever we did, everybody's got a different memory on that, and everybody's memory is right, even though you don't think it is. Have I ever told you of what we did with Argent in the clubs in Germany? It's not licentious at all.
I don't think so.
You probably wouldn't know this, and I'm not sure I should tell you. You might have to delete this, but anyway, we had a drum solo in Argent called The Fakir, and the reason we had a drum solo is that one of our number had a weak bladder all his life, and so he had to go to the loo halfway through the set. It was necessary. I won't say who he was, but when he joined the Kinks, but didn't have a drum solo, thank God. Can you imagine a drum solo in the Kinks? I won't go into it, but no, we didn't have a drum solo in the Kinks, but Jim still, this chap still had a weak bladder, so he had a bucket on the stage. I don't recall him ever having to use it, but if he had, I know that Ray would have done something. It's like if you broke a bass drum head, which happened very seldom, but Ray would always go for a song then that needed a lot of bass drum in it.
You were saying something about what I do in Munich.
Oh yeah, this is where we learnt our empathy, me and Jim. It was Argent, and we went to Munich to do a 9:45-minute spots a night, which, if you say it quickly, doesn't sound too much.
Seems like a lot.
But even if you've got only a quarter of an hour off every hour, that's still 9 hours work. And I'm going to use the platitude I normally use, which is it's like being down the mine, only like working down the mine, only harder. Not that I ever did work down the mine, but had my parents not come to London, I would have worked down the mines in the northeast, because that's what you did. I wouldn't have liked it, though. They didn't have too many drummers down the mines. Anyway, so we went to a place called the PN Club in Munich on Leopoldstrasse, and we got there and unloaded the gear into the club and decided to get something to eat. So we went into, and because Jim had been there before, and there's an accent I should be using, but I'm not going to use it. But Jim, because he'd been there before, he'd take us to places. So we went into this particular restaurant, and we were all sitting there, and Jim was with the new roadie, the one who couldn't drive on the wrong side of the road, and was sort of shepherding him through being in Germany. So the waitress came round, and we all deliberated about what we were going to have, but we went for the obvious things, except for Jim went for omelette surprise. So we looked across, and I had an inkling what omelette surprise was, but Jim didn't. And he said, with chips. And she said, okay. So the food arrived, we all got our food, and Jim got the chips. So because they were waiting for their omelettes, they thought we won't start on the chips until the omelettes come. So the chips are getting colder and colder and colder. Whereupon Jim is remonstrating with the waitress, where's my omelette surprise? And said, it comes later. He said, no, I want it now. So eventually she brought it out, and it was baked Alaska. And not only was it baked Alaska, it had sparklers in it. Dear old Jim. And yeah, well, I was boasting that we learnt our empathy there, and we really did, because the first show, first 45-minute spot, there was never anybody in the club except for women of negotiable affection who didn't care what we played, and they didn't care anyway about anything really. They'd be lined up along the bar, and we in the beginning thought they'd come to hear us. How wrong we were. But eventually Germany did change, and people were going to see music other than for sex, negotiable affection. So the first song was Dimples, and there's nobody there, so we could do what the hell we liked. So we started off playing it da 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 da, that sort of 2/4 type thing, da 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 da, and we'd go through for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Whereupon I would change it from my end and da da da, whatever it was, and we'd change the feel, but it'd still be the same song. And then another 10 minutes later, we'd go into 12, or we'd go into whatever it was, and we'd go into a shuffle. And at the end, we would get back to the beginning of the whole song and do it in 2/4, and that would be it. 45 minutes done. Thank you very much. And but nobody noticed. Nobody said a word. Well, nobody was interested except us. So we started learning things, and one of the things we went into from Dimples was down, which was Hold Your Head Up. So that's where Hold Your Head Up came from. And we had a wonderful time, and we learned things. Like it sounds a bit trite, but I learned that there are a great many places to put the offbeat. And the only way you can learn that is by playing a lot, in 9:45-minute spots. We only had enough for 3 45-minute spots, so we would play them 3 times. And the problem was there was a drum solo in the second spot, so therefore there was a drum solo in the 5th part and a drum solo in the seventh, or whatever it was. So there were lots of drum solos, and of course, since people were only there to buy sex or sell it, it was perfectly acceptable what we did. So that was where Jim and I learned, you know, the whole horse's eye thing, and going from tempo to tempo and feel to feel without any announcement other than me just starting it was a huge baptism for us. One of the things that he would do, as soon as we crossed the channel, whether it was via a plane or in a bus or whatever it was, Jim would get in the car and go into Eurospeak. So he would, and he always sat in the front. He would never sit in the back. So we'd all be sitting in the back, knowing what was coming next. And Jim would say, "We go now, yes?" So he had this whole language predicated on Eurospeak. So there are a myriad of stories like that, and bless him, I mean, we're not going to see his like again.
To the fields we are scattered, then from the dust we are born. We survive somewhat battered, to a new life in new dawn. In the end, what will it matter? There'll only be my ashes to scatter, and all the logical answers to a worrying mind will be scattered in time. Beaten and battered to the earth, you are scattered. You're going home, so what does it matter? To an atomic mind, scattered here while you travel time.